It is the year 2017. Having more than one child is illegal, and if you violate this rule, you wind up in prison.
Your babies are the property of the Mentel Corporation. Crime does not pay.
Yes, folks, that's right. This week, we're going to talk about the 1993 Christopher Lambert film, Fortress.
You're smiling. How the fuck can you be smiling?
Directed by Stuart Gordon and co-starring Lauren Loughlin, the great 80s and 90s villain Kurtwood Smith, a very young Clifton Collins Jr., Vernon Wells, Lincoln Kilpatrick, and Jeffrey Combs.
Crime does not pay.
Prisoners, your attention, please. You are about to enter the Fortress, a maximum security prison operated by the Mentel Corporation.
So, again, the year 2017, and the population being kept under control by this one child per couple rule.
Crime does not pay.
Abortion is illegal, and parents who violate this rule are imprisoned for life while their children become the property of the evil Mentel Corporation. Enter John and Karen Brannick, whose first child died and are now pregnant with their second. Caught at the border as they try to escape into good old Canada, the two are sent to an underground supermax prison run by the genetically altered Poe.
What are you?
I'm enhanced.
Here played by Kurtwood Smith, who has designs on Karen, while John plots an escape.
I don't think you realize your predicament, Rennick.
Back in the late 80s and early 90s, Christopher Lambert, as you called him here in America, although in Quebec we called him Christophe Lambert, after all, he was French, occupied kind of an interesting place in the pantheon of action heroes.
There can be only one.
So he definitely wasn't A-list like Schwarzenegger or Stallone.
Let it go.
And he wasn't even really B-list like Steven Seagal or Jean-Claude Van Damme. He was in the direct-to-video realm, but he was at the top of the heap in terms of direct-to-video films.
You have the manners of a goat, and you smell like a dung heap, and you have no knowledge whatsoever of your potential.
Theatrically, his movies sometimes would get released, but they never did particularly well in North America. Some of them were kind of semi-hits, but Highlander, don't forget, only actually grossed about $5.9 million domestically.
You look like a woman, you stupid haggis.
Highlander 2 actually did better.
Hate you.
He had a real following, though, on the home video market thanks to these early films, and he was a legit star in Europe. Thus, you kind of got these middle ground movies like Gunmen,
I gotta tell you, I don't swallow,
or Night Moves,
Checkmate.
which did technically get theatrical releases, but were bigger hits overseas and did very well in video stores.
I have something to say. It's better to burn out than to fade away.
So when this movie came out, there was some effort being made to elevate Lambert to an upper echelon of movie stars. You know, the thinking being that he could at least be a Steven Seagal-style star.
I'm just a cook.
A cook?
Fortress was a notable example. It got a kind of wide release from Dimension, which was then a subsidiary of Miramax, and it grossed about $6 million domestically.
Dead on arrival.
Didn't make much of a dent in North America, but overseas, Fortress was actually a pretty huge hit, one of Lambert's biggest ever, bigger even than some of the Highlander movies,
Your sentimentality is touching.
grossing a huge $48 million. Truly almost unheard of for a movie that did so poorly in its home territory. Lambert's career got a bit of a boost, with Highlander 3, The Final Dimension, also getting a North American release, and then The Hunted, which was actually a real studio movie from Universal. Plus, there was also Mortal Kombat, in which he played Raiden.
You have been chosen to defend the realm of Earth in a tournament called Mortal Kombat.
All of them did pretty well, internationally that is, and on video, but in theaters, they were all flops except for Mortal Kombat. And of course, he was not the star of that movie, so it didn't help him out that much. Fortress, however, is Christophe Lambert at his best. And I vividly remember seeing ads for Fortress in the newspaper when I was growing up in Quebec. You see, Christopher Lambert, or again, as we always called him when I was young, Christophe Lambert, really did have a big following because, you see, he was a star in France, and French celebrities kind of had more crossover appeal here in Quebec. He would often show up on chat shows in Montreal to promote his movies in French. And I think he was a much more lively guy speaking French than he was speaking kind of his halting English.
That was probably the most difficult side of it, is to forget about yourself and just be an animal.
What really excited 10-year-old me at the time was there was a blurb on the ad in the newspaper that said the movie was more powerful than Total Recall. I mean, more powerful than Total Recall? I loved Total Recall so much at the time that this immediately shot up to the top of my must-see list. And in the summer of '93, when I was 11, I biked up to my local video shop, rented the tape, and being pretty excited. Was it more powerful than Total Recall? Hell no. But you know what? I still really liked it.
You don't understand pleasure.
And after it showed up on the Movie Network, which was kind of the Canadian HBO here in Canada, I pretty much wore out my VHS recording of it.
Whoa. You should see what you fools look like through this thing, man.
So, at the time, I was a pretty heavy Lambert fan. I loved the first Highlander. I didn't really care for Highlander 2, although I did defend it at times, and Highlander 3 is probably the worst movie I ever saw in theaters. But Fortress. That was the golden era of Christophe Lambert.
My name is Brennick. Of course it is.
When I saw it hit Amazon Prime a couple months ago, I was cautiously optimistic about revisiting it, but I knew that given that it's a 26-year-old B movie from the 90s, it might not hold up super well.
This might hurt a little bit, okay?
To my surprise, though, Fortress is still a good little futuristic action adventure. It's definitely goofy.
You will be lucky if you end up a speaking spell.
But it's also fast-paced and fun, and I think the reason it holds up so well is because it's directed by Stuart Gordon, director of Reanimator.
You'll never get credit for my discovery. Who's going to believe a talking head? Get a job in a sideshow.
And he's one of the more underrated genre directors of the era. He loads the movie with enough grand guignol gore and sly social commentary that he might be forgiven for thinking this was a lost Paul Verhoeven flick. And had it been made on a bigger scale with a bigger star in the lead, it might have made his career. Fact is, this was actually designed as an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie.
You're shooting me. I'm not shooting on you.
That's what Stuart Gordon said in an unsourced interview that was found on IMDb. As he said, it was Arnold Schwarzenegger that got me the job, and it was because of Reanimator. We used Arnold's body double in Reanimator. The first reanimated corpse is a guy named Peter Kent, who was Arnold's double. He's got those big muscles. He got Arnold to see Reanimator, and Arnold liked it so much that he had a screening of it in his home, inviting all these people, including producer John Davis. John had the rights to Fortress, and Arnold was going to do it, but for some reason, I'm not sure why, Arnold finally decided he wasn't going to do the movie and dropped out. They had a huge budget, something like $60 or $70 million, which was pretty big in those days. But anyways, he dropped out, and the budget went way down. They cut the budget to about $15 million. Even still, you gotta say, he really did pull a lot out of his budget. Stuart Gordon made a great-looking movie, and Christopher Lambert is a very likable lead, even though I would say he's arguably miscast as an American ex-soldier. I mean, why didn't they just say he's French? Or at least American by way of France? I mean, he's got that really thick accent that's very noticeable. Anyway, what I always liked about Lambert was that he had this really cool everyman vibe and kind of a vulnerable streak. He didn't look like a supreme badass, so it always kind of made it a surprise when he'd eventually break out into old-fashioned ultra-violence. And the movie has that in spades because, yeah man, it is violent at times. And you know what? Critics actually kind of liked it. Christophe Lambert even noted in an interview with Den of Geek that there was a great review for it in the New York Times, which, as he said, he was flabbergasted about. Because I was saying, wow, the New York Times gave me like 4 stars for Fortress. Lambert is supported by an ace cast of character actors. Lauren Loughlin is good as his wife, but truth be told, female roles back in this era were really nothing to write home about, so she's stuck in a somewhat generic part. She looks great though. Yet, Kurtwood Smith is amazing as the head warden baddie, Poe.
Welcome home, baby.
Shall I intestinate?
Just a moment longer, Zed. This is a fascinating dream.
That is a nice compliment to his iconic turn in RoboCop.
RoboCop!
I always actually found it funny that he's probably most famous to millennials for his comic role as Red on that 70s show.
How'd you like to own a little bit of my foot in your ass?
Because when I was a kid, he was always evil in movies, not this kind of lovable curmudgeon that people see him as now.
Bitches leave.
Jeffrey Combs from Reanimator steals a lot of scenes as Lambert's long-haired mechanic cellmate.
This bitch is highly sensitive, man. We're talking TNT on PMS.
And you'll also see a young Clifton Collins Jr., then billed as Clifton Gonzalez,
scared don't survive inside,
playing the guy that Lambert has to protect from Vernon Wales's hulking jailhouse rapist.
Rise and fucking shine, asshole!
Oh yes, this leads to a massive action fight scene between Lambert and Vernon Wales, which ends with a nifty, gory display of a device called the Intestinator.
Prisoners, a demonstration.
But beware, there are versions of this movie that are out there that have censored all of the best gore bits. On Amazon Prime, it was all intact even though the movie was panned and scanned to 133:1, which kind of sucks. There's a lot of different versions of this movie out there. And it seems that a legitimate Blu-ray release of this movie is actually kind of tough to come by, possibly due to rights problems. There's even a version of the movie that just ends with them escaping from a prison and is completely lacking the last big action set piece where Brennick goes up against this futuristic tank with a machine gun. It's one of the best scenes in the movie, so it's kind of weird to think that they just chopped it out of different versions of the film, but what can you do? All in all, Fortress is a really solid blast of early 90s action movie nostalgia. Is it a great movie? Probably not, but it's a really fun one, and it is well worth checking out.
Night, night, sweetie.